We need to have a very serious, very direct, and completely honest conversation about where the Indiana Fever are heading into this Phoenix Mercury game, because the signals coming out of the organization in the aftermath of the Atlanta Dream embarrassment are not pointing toward accountability or correction. They are pointing towards something far more troubling, a potential pivot that would represent the most significant organizational betrayal of the season's competitive promise and the most direct abandonment of the only offensive identity that has actually produced winning basketball for this franchise. Let us start with what Stephanie White's post-game comments and behavior have led observers to conclude about today's game plan. The evidence, from her public statements blaming Caitlin Clark's turnovers for the Atlanta loss, to the footage of White scolding Clark after Clark had scored a basket in the third quarter, not after a turnover, not after a defensive breakdown, but after producing points toward a coaching staff that has made a calculation. The calculation appears to be this: the risk associated with Clark-centered basketball, specifically the turnover volume, is not worth the reward. And so the apparent lean is toward reverting to the offense that Stephanie White knows best and is most comfortable with, the Kelsey Mitchell isolation-heavy system that characterized the period when Clark was injured the previous season. Let that specific analytical conclusion be examined with the full weight it deserves. The Indiana Fever are considering, or have potentially already decided, to pivot toward a Mitchell-first offensive approach in the aftermath of back-to-back losses to the Atlanta Dream. 2 consecutive games where the Dream overmatched Indiana. 2 consecutive games where Clark was carrying the team competitively before the organizational infrastructure around her collapsed. 2 consecutive games where the coaching decisions and the roster limitations produced the results they produced. And the apparent response from the coaching staff is not to correct the organizational failures. It is to reduce Clark's offensive centrality because her 7-turnover game provided a convenient justification for a philosophical direction the coaching staff may have preferred all along. This is the most analytically significant and the most competitively consequential development this season has produced since the original motion offense fiasco that started Indiana at 5-5. The only thing that reversed that 5-5 record and produced the 4-game winning streak was running the offense through Clark with consistent intention and design. The evidence was unmistakable: 4-0 playing Clark ball, 5-5 playing the alternative. And now, after 2 losses that the coaching decisions contributed to producing, the apparent response is to abandon what worked and return to what did not.
Can anyone please explain to me what the heck just happened? Where is this ball? But by the way, look where Caitlin Clark is first. Now, I had this conversation with people the other day. I said Kelsey Mitchell, and a lot of people were like, oh, look, there was that time Kelsey Mitchell passed to Caitlin. Yeah, there are times when she does, and she has to. I mean, obviously, it's not completely never. That's absurd to think when you have only 4 teammates on the court. But yeah, you can make the general statement because it happens enough, as you see here. Kelsey Mitchell refuses to pass the ball to Caitlin Clark. Look at this. You will never in your life see Caitlin Clark as wide open as you see her right here. Or I should say, rarely more open. You will see it like this, usually in transition. And here's the other thing, and this is my point that I was making before and why I wanted to talk about this. If that is Caitlin Clark with the ball and Kelsey Mitchell is where Caitlin Clark is, guess what happens? Caitlin Clark gets the ball to Kelsey Mitchell, and Kelsey Mitchell takes a wide-open 3, which she's going to hit far more often than not. By the way, so is Caitlin Clark. Also, go back to the point of, hey, Caitlin had 26 points. She was never open. They were all tough buckets. Well, here's why. On the rare occasion, usually in transition like this, where Caitlin Clark is wide open, she doesn't get the basketball. Instead, I have no idea what it is Kelsey Mitchell was doing here, other than she's in panic mode. Oh my God, I can't get the ball to Caitlin Clark. She's wide open. She might hit a 3, but I'm the star of this team. I'm the star of this team. I can't let Caitlin Clark make open 3s, so I'm just going to... I don't know what I'm going to do. I still have no idea what the hell that was supposed to be. Does anyone know what that was supposed to be?
Kelsey Mitchell is a talented offensive player. When she is shooting efficiently, when the defensive coverage allows her individual creation to find open looks, when the competitive situation does not require the kind of complete offensive orchestration that Clark's playmaking provides, Mitchell's scoring is a real competitive asset. That is the honest, analytical truth about what she brings to this roster. But Kelsey Mitchell is also, by documented statistical record, a player who does not pass, who does not create for others, who accumulates assists at rates that do not reflect the ball movement this offense needs to be competitive against quality opposition. She was first-team All-WNBA in the previous season. She has been in MVP conversations. She has a competitive resume that is real. And she has spent most of this season demonstrating that her primary competitive instinct when she has the ball is to find a way to score it, regardless of what the offensive situation around her suggests would be the higher value decision. If Stephanie White is leaning toward running the offense through Mitchell in this Phoenix Mercury game, if the coaching staff has decided that the turnover concern around Clark outweighs the competitive value Clark generates, then what we are watching is not a tactical adjustment. It is an organizational, philosophical capitulation to the exact approach that produced 5 losses in 10 games at the start of this season. Now let us address the Phoenix Mercury directly, because the opponent in this game deserves honest competitive analysis rather than the dismissive treatment that the Fever's record against weaker opponents might inspire. Phoenix is 5-12. That record is not good. That record places them firmly in the bottom tier of the league's current standings. And yet this Indiana Fever team, with the most individually talented player in women's professional basketball, with the roster that was presented to fans before the season began as a championship-caliber organization, with the commercial profile and the national spotlight that Clark's presence generates, this Indiana Fever team has demonstrated all season that their competitive quality is not reliably proportional to the opponent's weakness. They beat bad teams when Clark and Cunningham go off individually enough to compensate for the systemic failures around them. They lose to bad teams when those systemic failures produce the kind of collapse that the Atlanta games produced. Phoenix has Kalia Copper, and Copper is averaging 19 to 20 points per game. Across both Atlanta games, this is absolutely a competitive situation that can go wrong. Phoenix also has Alyssa Thomas, another Olympian with interior competitive experience and defensive versatility that can create problems for Indiana's offensive execution. These are not cardboard cutout opponents. This is a losing team with real players who can compete on a given night. And the Indiana Fever's recent track record demonstrates that no lead and no talent gap is safe when the coaching decisions and the roster limitations combine to produce the collapse patterns this team keeps generating. The 5 competitive keys that this game demands clarity about are specific and analytically grounded, and each of them connects directly to the broader organizational story of this entire season. First, and most fundamentally, put the ball in Caitlin Clark's hands and let her play. The last 2 games represent situations where Clark should have had to slide. The answer is not to pivot away from Clark. The answer is to build around her with the intentionality and the organizational commitment that the 4-game winning streak demonstrated was possible when it was done correctly. Push the tempo, force the pace on made baskets as well as missed ones. Get the ball moving and get it into Clark's hands early and often. Second, force the tempo relentlessly. Phoenix has Alyssa Thomas, a physical and experienced interior presence who does not want to run. Phoenix has competitive crisis that the back-to-back Atlanta losses have created for Indiana's playoff positioning. They are sitting in 7th place. The competitive resume overwhelmingly built against losing teams, with the only victories over genuinely competitive opponents coming from the 4-game stretch when Clark-centered basketball was executed with consistency, does not inspire confidence about what happens when playoff intensity and competitive quality both escalate simultaneously. The Phoenix game is not a playoff game, but how Indiana competes in it, and specifically what offensive philosophy the coaching staff deploys, will tell the analytical community everything it needs to know about whether this franchise has learned anything from the competitive evidence this season has generated, or whether it is about to repeat the same mistakes in a different uniform. The Indiana Fever are in a diabolical position. That is the honest and complete assessment. Not because the talent is absent, not because Clark cannot produce what she has already demonstrated she is capable of producing, but because the organizational executed, or whether today's game represents the beginning of a retreat to the system that produced 5 losses in 10 games and the organizational direction that had this team looking like it needed to be blown up before the 4-game winning streak provided temporary evidence that something better was possible. The answer to that question will determine far more than today's result against the Phoenix Mercury.